Good morning, all. So today in this Zoom class, we are going to deal with the boy who broke the bank, Module 1, short story. Yesterday we learned, yesterday's topic was the portion, was the section was part B. So in the same lesson, we are going to learn the part, yesterday we learned part A, today we are going to learn part B. So in this class, we will be focusing on the following things. Number one, quick review of the lesson in 10 points. So yesterday, I felt the last 3 slides were hurried over as the class was time bound. And as I was asked to close the session, I had to hurry in connection with the last 3 slides. So making the complete sense without missing almost anything from the lesson, we are going to learn the complete summary of the lesson within 10 points, absolutely 10 points, as you heard, and also can see on the screen. And the next thing that we'll be focusing on is beyond the text. So other than understanding word by word, line by line, every text, every letter of the story, what the writer of the short story is actually trying to convey through the lesson beyond the text, what are his hidden intentions through the short story is discussed as part of this beyond the text. And the main focus of this class will be on comprehension passages. Comprehension of passages will be dealt as the core topic of this Zoom class. So much focus will be given on this area. Now, and at the end of these questions, having done the 3 areas preceded, questions area will be dealt at the end of this Zoom class. Questions in the sense, short questions will be there in the story. Other than annotations, there will be questions for each lesson. So how will be the questions? What are the possible questions in the examination point of view? So other than quick review of the lesson in 10 points, the other 3 will be dealt keeping the exam point of view. I mean, exam question paper will be kept in the mind, and the 3 topics will be dealt other than quick review of the lesson in 10 points. So this is what will be learned in this class. Now, as I said in the previous slide, the first thing is quick review of the lesson. Here it is short story, of course, and that too in 10 points. Right. Number one, Nathu tells his friend Sitaram that he wants to quit the job in the bank for not being paid salary. As we already learned the characters in yesterday's class, Nathu is a sweeper boy in the bank, and the bank is not paying his salaries for last several days, and it's already late, and he's very much upset, very much worried about it, and so he decides to quit the job, sweeping job in the bank. He conveys that information to his friend by name Sitaram. Next thing, so learning the condition of the Nathu, Sitaram promises Nathu that he would search for a new job for him. So he feels very sad. Sitaram feels very sad seeing the condition of the Nathu, and he promises Nathu that he would search for a new job as soon as possible, especially the job that suits to his current job. And the next is Sitaram comes to know about Mrs. Srivatsava is in need of a sweeper boy. Mrs. Srivatsava is one of the characters in the story, as we learned already. And Sitaram is a washerman's son. His job is to wash the clothes and press the clothes and deliver the clothes to the customers. So as he was doing that, one of his customers by name Mrs. Srivatsava was speaking to somebody else, saying that she's in need of a sweeper boy. As she was saying, this boy Sitaram comes to know, happened to hear that statement, happened to hear to that, listen to that information, So, learning that Mr. Srivatsava is in need of a sweeper boy, Sitaram feels very happy because his friend Nathu is trying for a new job. And Sitaram speak to Mrs. Srivatsava that there is a boy by name Nathu. Right. The fourth point tells that only. Sitaram tells Mrs. Srivatsava about Nathu and his condition and about bank not paying salaries to the Nathu. So Sitaram tells all the condition of Nathu to Mrs. Srivatsava. So after understanding the condition of Nathu, Mrs. Srivatsava feels like this, and Mrs. Srivatsava understands that the boy is leaving the job because the bank is unable to pay salaries to its employees. The boy actually, by name Sitaram, tells Mrs. Srivatsava that the bank did not pay salaries only to the boy Nathu. But Mrs. Srivatsava receives it, understands the information like the bank is unable to pay the salaries to all of its employees. Mrs. Srivatsava understands that the boy is leaving the job because the bank is unable to pay salaries to its employees. That is how she understands the information received from Sitaram. And the next point goes like this. Mrs. Srivatsava tells Mrs. Bhushan about the bank not paying salaries. This lady, Mrs. Srivatsava, is such a person that who cannot hide anything, any learnt news in herself, and she feels like vomiting it, spreading it to all as early as possible, as soon as she learns it. That is such a person she is. So after learning the information that the bank is not paying salaries to its employees, Mrs. Srivatsava conveys information to Mrs. Bhushan about the bank not paying salaries. And the seventh one is like this. It goes like this. The rumor spreads like a wildfire among many people. Which rumor? Of course, bank not paying salaries to its employees. Actually, the bank did not pay salary only to Nathu, but Mrs. Srivatsava received it as, understood it as, the bank is not paying salaries to all of its employees because the bank bankrupt. It is all her own perception, her own analysis, and she came to that conclusion, and she started to spread that information, rumor rather, to all. And soon the rumor spreads like a wildfire among many people. So it started to many people, started to spread to among many people, like from Mrs. Srivatsava to Mrs. Bhushan, Mrs. Bhushan to her wife, her husband, and her husband to Kamal Kishore barber, and Kamal Kishore photographic shop photographer, and from photographer to what do we call Deep Chand, who is a barber, from Deep Chand to his customer, elderly gentleman, and elderly gentleman to beetle seller, free vendor, and some other people, and the beggar, and all the people. It spread like a wildfire in the forest. So the rumor also spread like in such a way how the fire spreads in the forest. We'll move on to the next point. People come to conclusion that the owner has escaped with the money. As soon as the rumor was spread among the people, they started to discuss this issue at every corner, every shop, every pavement of the People Nagar. People Nagar is the area, location where this story is taking place. And people come to conclusion that the owner has escaped with the money. They don't go to his home, or they don't do any inquiry. They simply come to conclusion that the owner by name Seth Govind has escaped with the money, because one of the depositors of the bank, it is the elderly gentleman who was the customer of Deepchand the current day, makes a call to Seth Govind, and he does not answer. His wife answers saying that somebody else answers. it's not completely clearly known who answers. It is learnt when the customer calls to Seth Govind's number that the Seth Govind is not available and he is holidaying in Kashmir. So when this was known to people, people come to conclusion that the owner has escaped with all the money. So that is what the 8th point says. And the next one, 9th point, depositors vandalize the bank. Having learned that the owner escaped and owner is not available, depositors go panic and form a crowd. They visit the bank, rather attack the bank and vandalize the bank in order to have their money back. Bank manager tries to convince them, but he fails. His efforts go in vain, and depositors vandalize the bank, damage all the furniture, all such things are done. And the 10th point, the next day when Nathu comes back to the bank in order to do his regular job sweeping, he wonders, seeing everything got damaged, Nathu wonders why the bank got collapsed. So this is in a nutshell uh, the summary of the lesson. Now we will move on to the next slide. So beyond the text, what is beyond the text? If we focus less on each sentence, each word like this, and if we try to understand the story beyond it, like it will be like this. Though the story sounds funny, it actually focuses on the following themes. Stories like this, especially short stories, and what do we say, one act plays. Short stories and one act plays will be very funny. They sound very funny. But the thing is, if you take the example of the deer departed and the never nest and such stories, their one act plays and the refund, they're short and their one act plays. They, of course, they could also be considered as, of course, short stories and one act plays look and sound funny. Rather, if we focus if we focus on them and try to understand the hidden meaning, the writer will be trying to convey the social issue, the current social issue, the current social issue. So similarly, the writer is trying to say something in this story, in addition to fun, of course. Exploitation, he's trying to convey how the great hard work of some people, some category of every department or every area, every section, every institution, their hard work, how their hard work is exploited, how they are not paid, and in spite of doing very hard work. So that is one of the themes dealt in this lesson. And the other thing is how rumors spread faster and create panic among people. So this is another theme. Of course, this is easily understood. How rumors spread very faster than the truth, and they take no time. People don't spend any time whether the information is true or false, and they also start spreading. And how they end in creating chaos. How workless people shoulder the job of spreading the rumor and suffering innocent people. This is another theme. Of course, this has to be discussed as part of this class. So, workless people, this term refers to Mrs. Srivatsava. I personally feel the poet has taken the character Mrs. Srivatsava. If you read the story, like in a paragraph, before she sets out from the home, she assigns some works to her ayah and some and to her chef. So it is understood that she has everybody at home to do her work, and she absolutely has no work to do. And people like them, of course, people like them spread the rumors. So this is what I understood from the short story, and this is what the poet, the author tried to convey, I personally feel. So that workless people, how workless people shoulder the job of spreading the rumor and suffering the innocent people. So these are the themes beyond the text. Now the main core topic of the this class, comprehension passage. So as part of this comprehension passage, we'll be learning what, how, and types of questions. What in the sense, what is a comprehension passage? How in the sense, how should comprehension passage, how should questions in the comprehension passage be answered? How should questions in the comprehension passage be understood? That is also dealt. And the next thing is types of questions that are given as part of comprehension passage. These three areas will be dealt as part of this comprehension passage. We'll begin with what? What is reading comprehension or comprehension of passages? So the word comprehend syntactically means to read something and understand. So to comprehend means to understand something. A story or text containing 2 to 3 paragraphs is given. So this is completely an exam point of view. There will be, so under comprehension passage, there will be 2 or 3 paragraphs. And followed by that, there will be a list of 6 questions. Followed by, there will be a list of 6 questions followed by the text, out of which any 4 should be answered. So there will be 6 questions followed by the paragraph, and out of 6, the writer, the student, the examiner, the student examinee has to answer 4 questions. Now we have learned what a comprehension passage is. Now we will learn how should the questions in the comprehension passage be answered. How should the questions of reading comprehension be answered? And number one, these are I personally have. This is my personal plan, my personal strategy of dealing with reading comprehension, uh, and I feel it would definitely work. So the first idea, the first point to do with reading comprehension is read all the questions first, not the passage. Yes, of course. So if you read all the questions first without reading the passage, without having even a single look at the passage, the benefit behind this is just by reading the questions, you will understand 30 to 40% of the matter from the text. So this rule I will prove in the next slide. So read all the questions first, not the passage. Just by doing this, without reading the text, you will understand what is there in the text. As far as the 30 to 40% of the information is learned without reading the text, by reading the questions only. And the next thing is, and then read the passage carefully. After reading all the questions, now you need to read all the you need to read the complete passage very much carefully. And the third point is, of course, this is the last one. Read each question at once and find answer from the passage. So there is a difference between point number 1 and point number 3. In point number 1, we read all the questions one after the other. We don't read the matter in the passage. Whereas in the point number 3, we read one question at once and we go back to the text and we try to find the answer. And we read second question, we go back to the text and we try to find the answer. We read third question, we go back to the text and we try to find the answer. So this is the difference between point number 1 and point number 3. So as far as I know, while reading the passage, while doing the second point only, we will get almost nearly all the answers, I feel. So this will definitely work out. So class, so dear students, try doing this. Let us prove these rules let us apply these rules in the next slide with an example. Now let's understand with an example. Like we have learned 3 rules in connection with reading comprehension. Let us apply those in this passage. So this is the passage taken from the same lesson, The Boy Who Broke the Bank. Let us give a quick read to it. Let us apply the rules. What is the first rule? We need to read all the questions first. Let us. I would like all the participants to imagine that you do not know anything about the story. Only with this, only for this slide. Now I apply the first rule that reading all the questions. What was Deep Chand's occupation? I have read only the question. I do not know anything about the passage. Let us imagine like that in order to understand the rules in the previous slide. What was Deep Chand's occupation? I have read the question, but the question is providing me some information. What is that? There is a person by name Deep Chand in the passage, and there is some information about his occupation. That's it. This is the information I received from the questions. Generally, questions seek information, whereas in reading comprehension, if you read the questions first, questions provide information. That is the best part of applying this first rule. And the second rule, see this. Why did Deep Chand cut his customer's ear? So there is an incident in the paragraph. So I learned some information from this question is providing some information to us. Deep Chand, there is an incident in the paragraph that Deep Chand cut one of his customers' ear. And the third one, why did the early gentleman go to the general store? There is another person in the paragraph. The third question is providing us information. There is another person in the paragraph who is elderly gentleman. He went to general store. The third question is providing some information is that. And the fourth one is, where did Seth Govind Ram go? So the fourth question is providing the information like there is another person by name Seth Govind Ram and he also went somewhere. Write the word from the passage that means surprised and frightened. So, of course, there is a single word which means there is a single word in the paragraph which means surprised and frightened. And the last question is, what kind of news did Deep Chand and his customer hear? So while Deep Chand was working and when he has a customer to his shop, it is learned that there is a news received by these people. So this is the information we collected, we gathered before we read the passage. Of course, now we are done with the rule number 1. Let us apply the rule number 2, that is reading the passage carefully. Deep Chand, who was cutting the hair of an elderly man, was so startled that his hand shook and he nicked his customer's right ear. The customer yelped with pain and distress. Pain because of the cut and distress because of the awful news he had just heard. With one side of his neck still unshaven, he sped across the road to the general merchant store where there was a telephone. He dialed Seth Govind's Ram number. The Seth was not at home. Where was he then? The Seth was holidaying in Kashmir. So now you kept all the questions in your brain and read the passage carefully. As you start to read the passage, answer straight to your brain because you already have questions in your brain. So that is what the benefit of this strategy technique. Let us try to answer the questions now. What was Deep Chand's occupation? Of course, it is mentioned cutting hair. Who cuts hair? Barber, of course. Why did Deep Chand cut his customers' hair? Of course, they heard some awful news. Due to that, he did so. Why did the elderly gentleman go to the general store in order to make a call to the owner? It is there. See, he sped to the general. He ran to the general merchant store where there was a telephone, he dialed Seth Govind's number. Where did Seth Govind go? Of course, the last line is of the paragraph is that only. He was holidaying in Kashmir. Surprised and frightened, startled. What kind of news did Deep Chand and his customers hear? Awful and so shocked news. So this is how a reading comprehension should be dealt. So far, we have done with two areas of reading comprehension. That is what a reading comprehension is and how should the questions of reading comprehension be answered. Now, types of questions that are given as part of reading comprehension. Let us see the types of questions. There will be factual questions as part of reading comprehension. And of course, factual questions will be focusing on the facts, realistic informations like whereabouts and whatabouts and who all and such informations will be the answer for these factual questions. And these questions will begin with what, when, where, who, and true or false question. Of course, more or less this true or false questions also fall under factual questions. Let us see the next type of questions. Vocabulary based questions. Of course, synonym. There will be some words. We have seen a question in the previous slide. You can see it. Vocabulary based question. What is the word which means surprised and frightened? So that such type of questions could be considered as vocabulary based questions. We will have next slide in order to understand this slide better. So vocabulary based questions will be focusing on synonyms and antonyms and find the equivalent word in the passage for so and so. It will be like that. Provide the synonym for so and so word in the passage. Write the antonym for so and so word in the passage. It will be like that. These questions could be considered as vocabulary based questions. And the next one is evaluative or critical questions. So these are very interesting. These could be considered the third level of questions. What questions, when questions, factual questions and vocabulary questions more or less could be answered by every student. So these evaluative questions make the difference because they need some analysis. Because of course, these questions begin with why. Why did the person behaved in such a manner? Of course, such questions will be there beginning with the word why. Do you think the person has chosen the best option? Why? So this is how the questions look like. And the fourth type, that is last type of questions as part of comprehension of passages, will be umbrella questions. This is the highest level of questions asked in comprehension of passages. Comprehension of passages, umbrella questions. Let us try to understand what are umbrella questions. Umbrella question tests the all over understanding of the reader of the passage. So you might or might not find the answer, direct answer for these kind of questions. For example, like it will be like this for factual questions and for vocabulary based questions. And sometimes for evaluative questions, you might find direct answers in the passage. Whereas for umbrella questions, there are least chances of directly finding the answers from the passage. It tests the understanding ability, comprehension of the comprehending ability of the reader. Now we will move on to the next slide. An example for previous slide. Now we have a list of questions in this slide. Let us understand which question falls under which type. See, what kind of tree was there at the end of the bazaar? These questions are taken from the same lesson. This is a direct question. You can directly find this factual information in the paragraph or in the text. Shady tamarind tree could be the answer. So when you find the single word, single sentence answer, it cannot be considered as umbrella questions or critical question. It could be factual questions. So this is what the question begins with what, and it can be said as factual question. And the next question: whom did Mrs. Srivatsava meet? Whom? Simple, very simple answer. Mrs. Bhushan. And this is also factual question. What was Mrs. Bhushan doing there? And this needs a little more explanation, yet it is a factual question. What was Mrs. Bhushan doing there? Where? So you will find the information in the text. What was Mrs. Bhushan planning to buy? Of course, clothes. So these are all factual questions. And the fifth one could be vocabulary based question. The ladies didn't talk much about the color and the quality of the cloth. Right, true, or false? So if the sentence, you feel the sentence is true, you can write it as true. If you feel false, you can write it as false. So this is all. This could also be more or less vocabulary based questions. And name the town where the above meeting took place. It's a single word answer, of course. People Nagar is the place where the meeting, where this entire story took place. So this list consisted of mostly the factual questions, I feel, except the fifth question. So there will be umbrella questions. For example, the umbrella question would sound like this: Who do you think the main reason? Who do you think the main reason is for the spreading, for the rumor in the lesson, and why? So this could be an umbrella question. Now we are going to take some questions from the story. A list of questions will be there in the slide. And why did Nadu grumble to himself? So these are the short questions, and other than annotations, other than reading comprehension and some other match the following, there will be questions from each text to each story in the textbook, like in exam. So here in this slide, we will discuss how those questions should be answered. So why did Natu grumble to himself? How did Sitaram try to help Natu? What did Mrs. Srivatsava tell Mrs. Bhushan about the bank? How did the news spread in People Nagar? How did the customers of the bank, People Nagar, react to the news? How did the customers of the bank, People Nagar, react to the news? And the last question is, who do you think the reason? Who do you think is the main reason for the rumor that the bank has been collapsed, and why? So these could be the possible questions from the lesson, The Boy Who Broke the Bank, in exam. So these, why did Nadu grumble to himself? So the question is asking for the reason for the behavior of the Nadu. So you need to write the answer in such a way your answer provides the reason for the behavior of the Natu and why he behaved in such a way. And how did Sitaram try to help Natu? So Sitaram came to know the condition of Natu, right? After learning the condition of plight of the Natu, how he reacted, how he helped Natu has to be mentioned in this question. What did Mrs. Srivatsava tell Mrs. Bhushan about the bank, and how did the news spread in People Nagar? So Mrs. Srivatsava has told something to Mrs. Bhushan that has to be mentioned as part of the answer of this question, and that information is in connection with the bank. So this is that. So that is also to be focused. That needs to be focused as part of this answer. How did the news spread in People Nagar Bank? So the information discussed between Mrs. Srivatsava and Mrs. Bhushan was spread all over the People Nagar. Uh, how that news was spread has to be focused as part of this answer. So the students have to focus on in such a way. And moving on to the fourth point, how did the customers of the bank People Nagar react to the news? What is the news and how they reacted should be focused. Who do you think is the reason, is the main reason for the rumor that the bank has been collapsed, and why? So this, as I said just a little ago, this could be an umbrella question of the whole story. This needs the complete analysis of the student, analysis of the story of the student, like how the student received the story, and who the student feels the main reason for the spreading of the rumor, and what are the reasons for showing particular person to be the reason for spreading of the rumor. Such points to be focused has to be focused as part of this answer. So this is how the questions, short questions in main exam should be answered. And that's the end of the show. Now I would like to have the feedback of doubts from the participants.